Hey there, my name's Gary Sims and this is the Vivo V15 Pro with its elevating front-facing camera. So the first thing you'll notice about the V15 Pro is this ultra view display, which means that there's no bar at the top, normally where the earpiece would go and the front facing camera. There's no chin at the bottom. It's got this display that literally does go edge to edge. We're talking about a couple of millimeters of bezels around the outside. And the way they've done that is by using this elevating front facing camera, so they don't need a space for it there up at the top. And also there is an under display fingerprint reader. So when you put all that together, you've got this nice full view display. And I must say, in the time I've been using this phone, it really is nice, particularly when I'm showing photos to people, that it takes up that whole display and it really is a good viewing experience that you have in your hand. On top of that, it's a Super AMOLED display, so the colours are nice and vibrant and those blacks are nice and dark. And it's got full HD plus resolution, which translates to 1080 by 2340 pixels. So that's what's happening on the front of the device. What happens when you flip it over? Well, when you do look at the back of the device, you see this lovely color scheme they've got going on here. Here I've got this nice blue one, but more importantly, you've got this triple camera system. That's a 48 megapixel sensor for normal photos, an 8 megapixel sensor for wide shots, and a 5 megapixel sensor for depth information. Now, we'll talk more about the camera in a little bit, but it does certainly take pride and place here on the back of that device. Unfortunately, there is a camera bump, which means if you do type with the phone on a flat surface, then it will rock as you're typing, something personally I am not very keen about. In the past, when I've talked about phones with camera bumps, people have said, well, of course, if you put a case on it, that will solve the problem. Now, you do get a free case with this phone, but ironically, it also has a camera bump, so it doesn't actually solve the wobbling problem when you are typing. Also in the box, you get a fast charger that can do 18 watts, that's 2 amps at 9 volts. You get a pair of headphones and you get a USB cable. And I'm sad to say this phone uses a micro USB port. So if you've managed to switch over to USB Type-C, then this really is going to be a legacy device for you. Taking a quick look around the edges of the phone, at the very top, of course, you've got that elevating selfie camera. I'm pleased to say there is a 3.5mm headphone jack. On the right hand side, you've got the power button and the volume keys. On the very bottom, you've got that micro USB port, as I mentioned a moment ago. You've got a SIM tray that can also take a micro SD card. You have a single speaker grill. On the left hand side, you have a dedicated AI button, which I'll talk more about in a minute, and you have a second SIM tray. So this seems to be one of those rare phones where you can actually use 2 SIMs and you can actually use a micro SD card all at the same time, although I must say I haven't actually tried that. So let's talk about the camera for a little bit. Now, of course, that main sensor is a 48 megapixel sensor. However, if you read the small print, you'll see that actually it only produces 12 megapixel photos. And that's because 4 pixels are used together in a kind of a super sampling way to actually just produce 1 pixel on the actual photo. So it isn't really a 48 megapixel camera. It's actually effectively a 12 megapixel camera, and that can actually drop as low as 8 megapixels depending on the ratio that you're using while you take the photo. Overall, I was very impressed by the quality of the photos that came out of the Vivo V15 Pro, particularly the nighttime mode, which I actually used quite a lot because I really was quite impressed by the photos. Now, the way it works is if you take a photo in the night shot mode, then it will take a much longer exposure, maybe 5 seconds, and it will then stitch all that information together to bring out the extra light in those photos. So kind of like HDR for daytime, but actually using it at nighttime. But the caveat is you do have to keep the phone very, very still. So I found the best results are when you're kind of leaning up against something, maybe a window frame or kind of, you know, a pillar or a post or that kind of thing. It works very well. You don't necessarily need to use a tripod, but you certainly do need to keep it still. But when you do that, those nighttime shots can actually look pretty good. And as I said, there is this wide angle shot, and that actually is very nice. It's actually not too wide that you get any kind of barrel distortion, but it is good that you can kind of get a bigger scene of what you're taking, particularly when you're taking pictures of landscapes, and being able to really get the edges of that photo. So using the wide angle shot was also, I was pleased with the results. Unfortunately, I can't say the same about the front-facing camera. Although that nice pop-up camera is very, very nice to watch, is very, very nice to see in action, and it says it's 32 megapixels. Actually, again, they're using some kind of super sampling here, and you actually get 8 megapixels photos out of it. And actually, when you do a bit of pixel peeping on them, you'll find the quality isn't that good at all. Now, as for the depth sensor, that's there so that you can have that artificial bokeh effect applied in post-processing. Basically, it's there to kind of gauge how far away the subject is, and then it can see what's beyond that and kind of apply the blurring. And like most of these systems, when it gets it right, it's okay, and when it gets it wrong, it just basically gets it wrong. As you can see from some of these photos here, even this picture of me, which it should be able to detect me wearing a hat, but even the hat there is blurred when it shouldn't be. There's some stuff over my shoulder there that's blurred that shouldn't be. And again, the same, when you apply this to objects rather than people, you can get mistakes in the processing. So when it works, it will work well, but it can't be guaranteed to come out as you expect. The good news is that actually this is something you can do in post-processing. You can change the depth. So if you find it's actually focusing things that it shouldn't be, or things are out of focus that shouldn't be, you can actually just drop down that bokeh effect and maybe bring some things back into focus and kind of save the picture. The camera also includes the Jovi image recognition system, which allows you to take a photograph of something or point the camera at something, and it will kind of use some image recognition software to tell you what's in that photo. And it looks like it brings up links for shopping sites so that you can buy something similar. Now, sometimes it worked and brought up links, and for me, even though I'm in Europe, it was bringing up links for shops in Malaysia. And sometimes it would just say, please connect to the internet, and it just didn't give you any results, even though I was connected to the internet. So it seems to be a bit hit and miss, and I'm not really sure of its actual value, really. And that Jovi image recognition system can be activated either when you're inside the camera or actually by double tapping on the AI key on the left hand side of the phone. If you single tap on it or long press on it, you'll get Google Assistant. So it's actually a nice way of getting very quickly into Google Assistant. And the good news is it can be remapped in the settings. So let's talk a few minutes about the internals of this device. It comes with the Snapdragon 675. That's a very, very recent processor from Qualcomm, and it uses 2 Cortex A76 cores and then 6 Cortex A55 cores. And it will be interesting to see how it compares with the other high-end devices in the 600 range and of course in the 700 range. It also has the Adreno 612 GPU, so actually it will be able to play good games on it. I've been able to play things like Need for Speed without any worries whatsoever. However, of course, you're not going to get the same GPU performance that you would get from, let's say, a flagship device using a Snapdragon 800 series processor. So let's have a quick look at the benchmarks. For Geekbench single core, there's a score of 2,388, which actually makes this phone faster, according to Geekbench, than the Snapdragon 835, maybe something you'll find in a Pixel 2. For the multi-core score, it's actually 5,535, which is actually slightly less than what you'll get in a Snapdragon 835. And then a test like Antutu, which also includes GPU and CPU, will give you a score of 170,102, which again is greater than something like the Pixel 2. The phone comes in several different versions. Some have got 8 GB of RAM, some have got 6 GB of RAM. The one I was using had 6 GB of RAM and 128 MB of internal storage. Now, normally at this point, I'd want to run Speed Test G on this device to see how it performs. Unfortunately, Speed Test G won't run. One of the tests crashes and I can't find out why, and it actually works on every other phone that I've tried except for this Vivo V15 Pro. And talking to one of my colleagues, they also found another benchmark tool that won't run on this device. So that's a bit sad, particularly since this has the Snapdragon 675 in it, and I really would like to see how it performs under Speed Test G. But that does lead me into the whole area of the software. The V15 Pro does not use stock Android, it uses FunTouch OS, which while based on Android 9.0 really is a heavy skin. Lots of things have been changed, including of course things like there's no app drawer, all the settings have been changed, all the apps that are in there are not any of the standard Android stock apps, they all come from FunTouch OS. While you do get Google Play and a lot of the Google apps pre-installed, most of the standard apps are actually from this FunTouch OS. On top of that, in the first few days of using it, I really was getting bombarded by permission requests, even for the most simplest of things, the keyboard and the album, the gallery, and every single app almost seemed to be asking me for permissions, and I thought permissions that really weren't kind of appropriate for what they were doing. Why on earth does the gallery need these permissions? So that also secondly did kind of alarm me slightly. Having said that, I haven't had any major crashes or unexpected reboots. However, FunTouch OS really does need some extra polish and some refinement to bring it up to the level of software that we see today in stock Android and from the other major OEMs. And finally, let's talk about battery life. It has a 3,700 milliamp hour battery, which should be ample to get you through a normal day of usage. However, I have found that if you are a heavy game player, actually the battery drain can be greater than you might assume. For example, just playing gamings, you'll find that the whole battery can be drained in just about 3.5 hours, which actually is unexpected from a battery of this size. However, if you stay away from 3D gaming or you don't play it very much, then you should be able to get through the day without any problem. Even if you do need to recharge, the good news is though that fast charging works very, very well on this device. So what does that mean overall? Well, there's a nice hardware package here. The display, the UltraView display is excellent. The in-display fingerprint reader works flawlessly. You've got nice colors, you've got nice blacks, you've got a nice processor in there, the Snapdragon 675, good amounts of memory and internal storage. The camera system on the back is okay and does produce some reasonable photos. However, the package is let down overall by the software, and that elevating camera, although it looks nice when you see it going up and down, actually it doesn't produce the kind of quality of selfie photos that I would be expecting from this camera. Okay, my name is Gary Sims, this is Android Authority. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. Also do check out the written review which goes along with this video, and you'll find that on the Android Authority website. Okay, that's about it. I'll see you in the next one.